just always remember that no one is judging you more harshly than you're judging yourself. And if we can always remember that, we see these changes in our faces and our bodies, and we're like, oh, I'm falling apart. Meanwhile, like everyone around us is falling apart, and nobody's thinking these things that we think they're thinking. And if they're
Right.
thinking it, who cares?
Menopause has long been shrouded in secrecy, leaving many clueless, ashamed, and embarrassed to seek and extend support for one of the most natural transitions and rite of passage. Well, the spirit and mood have changed. People are surrendering to curiosity, knowledge, and empowerment. In this podcast, I'll share my own experiences and point of view, peek into the lifestyle and self care practices of people experiencing menopause, and tap experts for their take on the pausal phase. This is for you if you are one of the millions of people in the menopausal phase or want to support them. I'm Dixie Lincoln Nichols, health and well-being educator and wellness founder. This is the Pause Pod.
Hello, hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to the Pause Pod. You may or may not know, I recently closed my retail business Inside Outer Beauty Market back on August the 31st. So I wanted to take some time to recalibrate, to rejuvenate, to realign, to reassess, to rest, and all that really good stuff. So now that that's done, I'm super excited to dive into new episodes I recorded with super phenomenal guests who are going to share their stories with you and also share tips and resources with you to support you on your menopausal journey. You know, this is a community that I'm creating so people can access each other, share their experiences, learn from one another, and take on this phase as a collective, because that's what it is. So super excited for that and for you to tune in. Okay, enough of that. On to my guest today. She is a rock star, and I've been following her for some time now. I love listening to her because she is so full of resources and tips. So let's get to know Trae Bodge. She's an accomplished lifestyle journalist and TV commentator, specializing in smart shopping and saving money. She has appeared on air more than 1,000 times in the last decade, including Today's Show, Good Morning America, NBC Nightly News, Inside Edition, and network affiliates nationwide. Trae's expert commentary can be found on MSNBC, Forbes, Fortune, Time, AARP, MarketWatch, Yahoo, and others. Trae is also the co-founder of One Take, a media coaching firm where she helps her clients feel their best on camera. Super excited to have her on. Welcome, Trae. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to start by asking you how you got to this point, a money saving expert. We're going to dive into the menopausal bits and the money saving bits later, but let's just get to know a little bit about you first.
Sure. So, I'll make a long story as short as I can. I was in the beauty industry for a long time, working for other brands, and then I started my own brand with two partners in the '90s, which feels like forever ago. I ran that with my partners for almost 15 years, and then I just kind of hit a point, and this is probably right around perimenopausal time for me, where I just needed more. I was running my own business, and you might think that that was enough, but I felt like we weren't growing anymore, and therefore I wasn't growing anymore. I felt like I had a lot more to learn and a lot more to do, and so I left the business and I started interviewing at large beauty corporations because I, for some reason, thought that's where I belonged. And people were kind enough to see me, but no one could figure out what to do with me. They were interested in my story, and they thought, I have this box and this box open. I cannot fit you in either box. And so it became clear after some time that this was not going to work. My plan was not going to happen in the way I had envisioned, which was very frustrating, but it was an incredibly important life lesson for me that while it's important to listen to your own heart and your own instinct, if so many people around you don't see what you see, sometimes it's good to listen. And so once I started listening to what other people were saying, that's what set me on this other path. At the same time, I was trying to earn money and I was writing this sort of money saving content for a couple of different websites who were kind enough to give me a shot because I had done writing at my for my business previously. And that kind of set me on this other path, which I found that I really loved. And at the same time, as I was interviewing, people are saying, you're not back of the house. I kept saying, I want to be in the lab. I want to get dirty. I want to make makeup. I want to create products. And they're like, nope, nope, you belong in the front of the house. And I was like, what does that even mean? So I fell into a really great freelance situation at Retail Me Not, which is a big coupon site. It turned out that they were starting to do some media, and I was watching them kind of struggle a little bit. And I said, "Hey, I'm media trained. Can I help you? Is there anything that I can do?" And it turned out they were looking for a spokesperson, which was, it's a very rare job and a very cool job. And it turned out that I fought for the job and I got the job. And it was a fantastic experience for me work wise. For 3.5 years, I learned so much. It was my first kind of real job after working for myself and smaller companies along the way. And I did that for 3.5 years with them. And then they had a big layoff in 2015. And I was convinced at the time that I could do this myself. After the layoff, I just set off to do the same kind of thing that I was doing for them for myself. And I have not turned back and no regrets at all. And that was sort of the best cliff to get pushed off of, was to be laid off, because it allowed me to fly. And here I am.
I love it. What do you think gave you the courage to fly?
That's a hard question. I feel like while I was at Retail Me Not, our program was very successful. So I was under marketing in on the PR team, and I had sort of PR experience from being representing my own business. And it was such an interesting learning experience, but I also felt like I was being underutilized. I felt like I had a lot of ideas, a lot to say, and because it was a medium-sized company, there were so many other cooks in the kitchen, and so I felt left behind a lot. Even though I was the one of the faces of the company, I didn't have that much of a voice ultimately. And that's sort of the within the confines of a company, that's often the case, right? And so being out on my own, I just felt like this is the opportunity for me to use those ideas that I had and see if they have merit, right? And see if there's validity
Mhm.
there. And because I had a very kind of easy start and a successful start and hit the ground running, I just started to believe more and more in myself. I mean, I will tell you, I mean, I had many doubts. I wasn't sure. I remember meeting with someone for an interview and they asked me, well, does Trae Bodge matter without Retail Me Not? And I was like,
Ooh.
I don't know. I think so. So let's find out. And so my husband was off, also really supplementing because I was again out of work. And thankfully I had that partnership and that support as I was kind of getting started again. But I learned very quickly that I did have value and I did matter. And so that courage grew over time just because I saw that what I was doing was working. And what I knew from my former position that I was applying to this, combined with my ideas that went unheard for a long time, was sort of a powerful force. And I could feel myself sort of bolstered by that, which was really exciting.
I love that. Now, here's what I'm hearing, because earlier you mentioned perimenopause. It was probably around the perimenopausal time. So I'd like to ask you two things. How did you know, and what made you suspect you were in perimenopause? And do you think that there is a connection between the perimenopausal experience and that level of confidence and value that you began to feel for yourself?
As I was sharing my story with you, I did start to realize that the timing really lined up there, right?
Right.
And I think there was this restlessness that I started to feel, but also really enjoying some aspects of getting older. The main one being is that I felt like I had this knowledge, and I felt
Mm.
like I had this gravitas, and I felt like I had things to do. And there was just no question about that, even though it was such a huge leap to leave my business and just kind of go out on my own. I feel like the timing of that, entering perimenopause, was all part of that same story somehow.
You just gave me goosebumps saying that because it resonated with every cell in my being because it's how I felt as well. And for many women whom I've spoken to, they say to me, and I felt the same way and still feel the same way, there is an awakening that begins to happen. I feel like perimenopause starts an awakening of the body. Women begin to accept themselves in ways that they hadn't before. They tap into that, and that brings such beautiful adventures. It really makes the transition so much more seamless, not perfect, but seamless, as opposed to shying away from it, as opposed to pulling back to it. It's like lean into it because sometimes we just don't understand what we're feeling. And there is this restlessness that we start feeling, right? I think a friend of mine equated it to Uranus awakening, is what she called it. And I have to look more into
Mm,
that. But I feel that what you're saying to me is exactly the way that I felt. And so many other
mm.
women I've spoken to, they've felt that way. But somehow we're not making that connection. We're not making the connection that our bodies are requiring something different. And we just need to listen to it, listen to that awakening and step into it. And you leapt. And look where you are.
Yeah, and this is so interesting because I'm really thinking about it in these terms for the first time. Something else that happened at that same time is I met this woman who she's probably 10-ish years older than me, and she was an executive at a large beauty brand and was just out there in the world crushing it. And I just every time I saw her, I felt so inspired by her, and I kept thinking in the back of my mind, I want to be her when I grow up, like she's incredible. And she really started this for me, like she inspired me and gave somehow I took the confidence that she had and applied it to my own life. And she was part of sort of the process of me finding another job or not. She's like, I'm going to help you, and she introduced me to all these people. And even though it didn't work out for me in that regard, like that was really the starting point for me. And I think that all lined up with, perimenopause, meeting this incredible postmenopausal woman who was just out there in the world, just dominating. And that gave me the strength to go. And it was very frustrating for me at first. And because I kept seeing this one way and was not working. But once I kind of found my lane, I just felt incredibly powerful. And then at my former employer, feeling underutilized and just feeling so frustrated by that. And so when I was laid off, it was literally the best thing that could have happened to me. I looked back and I was just like, thank you for that, because I was just sitting there feeling frustrated at a job, as so many of us do. And you get stuck there and you have
Mhm.
that stability and you're afraid to leave and take a chance and all those things. And I will say that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Because I ran my own company before, I knew that I could again. And so I don't want anyone listening who is afraid to take that leap, who hasn't run their own business. Obviously, you have, so you know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not everyone is an entrepreneur. And I've actually, along those lines, been so sort of troubled by in the past few years this conversation about, you should just go and do in quiet quitting and do your own thing and hustle culture and all that. And it's really not for
No.
everyone, and we're not all built for it. And so I've seen so many people feel like, yes, I can do it, and they go out there and they can't, or they're impatient, or they're not built like that entrepreneur, right? And then some people have to work for other people. That's what makes the world go round in a lot of ways. So I just don't want anyone to hear this and feel like, well, I tried and I couldn't, or I'm too afraid. That's okay too. I am an entrepreneur at heart. My mother was an entrepreneur. I worked in her shop when I was a kid and saw her create her own business. So it's in me to do it, but it's not in everyone.
Got it. I love that you say that. Like you, I got my start in my uncle's bakery when I was 15 years old, 14, 15. And I loved it. I loved being behind the cash register. I loved interacting with people, but I loved science and I loved biology and I loved the body. And so I always knew that I wanted to do something along those lines. What I figured it out later, and here I am. But I also know that there are many lessons to be learned. And one of them coming up for me, you're probably going to be the first one I'm saying this to out in the world, is that I'm about ready to close my business down. I'm making an announcement in a week or so because the time has come. And that's
Mm,
one of the other things you have to know is when to quit. Right. So I have, and again, all of this is a part of this awakening that began around 38, right around the time perimenopause kicked in. And the
mhm,
transition has lined up for me beautifully. And I have learned to surrender and lean into what my body is saying I need to lean into. Not that I've leaned in without a fight.
mm, mm.
I've fought, but I realize when I fight back, what happens. It's like you said, that's not the road for me. I have to switch. I have to pivot. I have to realign and recalibrate. So thank you so much for making that very clear.
It's also tough when you're in a situation, when you're in a place of desperation. For
Yeah.
example, if you are not working, you've been laid off, or you're unemployed, and you have all these ideas and you want to do these things, but ultimately the rent needs to be paid, the mortgage, your bills, you have
Right.
children to take care of, what have you. That's a very tricky place to be. And so, I did mention before that I had this support from my husband, and that's not the only way, obviously, but it helps to have an anchor of some kind so you can fly. And, our
Absolutely.
agreement was, I'll fly now, you fly later. And that's how we've always done it. And it's different for everyone. But I will say that if you're in a position of desperation, it's really hard to kind of lean in and listen and be free and all
Right.
of that when
Right.
you're like, oh shit, how am I going to pay my rent,
Absolutely.
so that financial stability plays a big part in how much freedom you can have. And so for me, the when I left my beauty business, it was very tough because I didn't have any money, right? And so like I was coming from a place of desperation, and that sort of that there came the fight. It was more of a
Mm,
struggle versus when
right.
I was laid off, I had severance and I was more financially stable and I could
Right.
be quieter and approach things more naturally and organically, and so I think that that financial situation plays a big part in how much freedom you can have in this next when taking this next step in your life.
I love that. And here is where your expertise comes in. I mean, there were so many lessons you just gave us right there. So many tips you just shared. Like you, I also had my husband who and still is the anchor in our home. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go out into the world and explore all of these possibilities for myself in terms of entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
But now it's like, yeah, I want to take some of the burden off of him. This thing is not going where I want it to go. It's not growing, it's not in a sustainable place. So it's time to explore other possibilities, other skill sets that I have that I absolutely love and would love to give a chance to. So here I am. So thank you for sharing that. I want to get back to menopause for a bit.
Mhm.
So we touched on perimenopause, and this is the multidimensional, multidisciplinary aspect of you that I love. So we get to talk about money saving tips, but we also get to talk about you, the person behind the brand, and how you are navigating this space, and how perimenopause and the transition into menopause played a role in your life and how you're navigating it and sustaining your wellness during this time.
Mm.
Tell us, when did you first realize like you were in perimenopause, and how was the journey, and how has the journey been for you since that realization?
I think I was in my late 30s. I'm 54 now. I entered menopause early, probably in my late 40s or mid 40s. And it just kind of started with lots of aches and pains for me. And I went to the doctor when, especially in my late, yeah, it must have been late 40s, because I was like, I'm so achy, you know?
Mm.
And he's like, well, you're almost 50 years old. Like, and I was like, yeah, I'm almost 50 years old. I should not feel like I'm 90, and I couldn't understand what was going on. And he was just like, well, this is life. And I was like, no, that I'm not willing to accept that. And then of course,
Wow.
hot flashes and insomnia, and this very, like, these very bizarre senses of worry, and anxiety about ridiculous things. Like I have a fear of food poisoning, which is like so stupid because I haven't had food poisoning since the 90s. So it's like, and that kind of escalated as like I was perimenopausal into menopause. I see now, like, okay, there are these like six things that I can pinpoint now, and that are so common amongst all the women who I know who are going through all of this. But because I went through a little bit on the early side, I didn't have a lot of people around me who were going through it at the same time, and they were all like, tell us how it goes so you can look back and help us with those hot flashes.
Right.
And I'm also, I'm a lifestyle expert, so I write about products all the time. So I have this incredible privilege to be able to try lots of things, like menopausal supplements or CBD or sleep products and things like that, wicking material for pillowcases.
Oh,
So
yeah.
right, like, so I have all this access, which is incredible. And then I can kind of share my findings with other people. And then, there was my hair too. Like, I started going gray actually in my mid early 20s. And then it like really sped up through perimenopause and menopause. And I was just like, well, like, this is just, this is going to be the thing. And, some people love it. And some people are like, oh, you're really aging yourself 10 years right now. And I'm just like, like, this is what it is. Like, this is how it's going
I
to
get you.
be. And, I feel like it's become my signature now. But it's kind of that whole picture and of a woman of a certain age, and like accepting all of those things and the changes in your body. That was another big one actually that I neglected to mention was, the sort of menopausal weight gain that started to happen. And I was like, oh no, I'm so sorry. This is not working for me. I remember when it started to happen and I was like, but I'm not doing anything different, and I'm working out every day and I can't fit into my clothes anymore. And I started feeling this like incredible sadness about that because I love clothes and fashion and shopping, and so I'd go to the thrift store with my daughter, and I felt like I don't want to buy anything for myself because I don't want to dress that body, So I would shop for her instead. And I was like, okay, I can see like a coping mechanism happening there. What am I doing? And then I went home to where I'm from in Massachusetts for a visit, and I saw a bunch of my old friends all kind of in that body space as well.
Mm.
And I was like, nope, that's that's not going to work. And so I thankfully found a solution, and, love it or hate it, I just started very loosely counting calories. And I'm not a dieter. I have never been like, I don't restrict, I don't do any of that, but it's just like being mindful of calories every day it helped get me back to like, oh, okay, that bag of chips on the couch or that ice cream is like really killing my whole day. Let me get some control over that, and just being more mindful and just getting to that place from an emotional and mental standpoint really helped. And so then I was able to kind of get back to a weight where I was comfortable. And that helped a lot, I have to say. Um, the women who I know who are going through this, to me, one of the bigger and more onerous things is the weight gain that can happen, and the loss of your waist and the widening of your back. It's like you look in the mirror,
Mhm.
and then of course you're getting wrinkles and your hair is going gray and you don't recognize yourself. And that to me is what makes this hard for a lot of people, because you don't know who she is, right? And so, my sort of biggest word of advice is like, try to reclaim who she is as much as you can, with a healthy level of acceptance of who she's becoming, because some of that stuff you're never going to get back, right? But for me, it was like the weight gain had to go. That for me was a non-negotiable, but that's not the same for everyone. The hair could go gray, but the body had to kind of get back to a more comfortable place, and that helped me then navigate all those other changes and be more accepting, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. And it's so interesting that you said you count your calories regardless of what people say because it works for you. And I think that's important for people to understand is that different strokes for different folks. And whatever works for you is what you have to do. I think the important thing here is that you came into awareness about your body and what you needed to do to bring yourself back to your healthy, what healthy means for you. And that was your body weight, which was a non negotiable. So if you have to count calories, then count calories. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I just
So
don't think it's necessary to like weigh all your food and like become obsessive about it. If there's a place that you can get to with any of these things, a place of ease, a control with ease is for me what I'm always looking for, and something that's sustainable. So like,
mhm,
I don't agree with like restricting, like I was saying, prescribed diets, because you can't live that way, right? You can't be keto your whole life. I mean, I guess you could, but like, why would you want to?
it's not for
Like,
you.
yeah, I mean, I love food and I love cocktails and I love to live my life that way. And so my approach was like, how do I do that in a way that's more manageable and taking more responsibility for what I'm putting in my body and
Mhm.
the health that's attached to that. And so that for me was a good balance, and it took away that sadness that I felt for that other person who I felt like I was losing. And so for me to sort of reclaim her and get back to her gave me power, and I think that there's a way for us all to do that. But whatever changes that you're making, they have to be sustainable. You have to ask yourself, can I do this for the rest of my life? And so for
Mhm.
me, using this app, I use Lose It. I was like, can I use Lose It app for the rest of my life?
Right,
And
right.
my answer was yes. I'm committing to this for the rest of my life, and I've been using it for 4 years or something like that, tracking every single day, but
Mhm.
literally 5 minutes, like throwing food in there, just watching, like, okay, okay, and that's it. It's not like this whole, life consuming thing, but this allows me to live with her, you know, in a happier place, and not feeling that loss or regret as I age.
Right. Sounds to me like you found the recipe for you to accept that change.
Hmm.
I know for me it was leaning into the idea of impermanence. It's what helped me to
Mm-hmm.
understand that everything changes. My body is changing. It's not going to be the same. Life around me is going to change and my body is no different. And doing things like standing in front of the mirror, because yes, these changes are hard to accept. Like you said, the back widens, the weight gain, the hair starts to go gray. And of course, it's different for everyone. I also wanted to fully accept my body and all of its facets. So I have this thing where I do my mirror works. I stand in front of the mirror,
Hmm.
naked, and I just look at myself. I stare at myself. I turn around and I look. And I realized that the more I did that, the more comfortable, like you said, she became to me. I
Hmm.
started liking her a lot more, appreciating her a lot more. It's really funny, but you have to get super connected and intimate with yourself. And when I
Hmm.
say intimate, I don't even mean that in a sexual way. I mean, something that works really well for me is the act of moisturizing. Like I
Mm.
moisturize my scalp to my soul every morning. I take 10 minutes, 365 days a year, and I moisturize my skin. I stick my hands behind my back as far as I can reach. And that has helped so much. What do you do? What are some of the things that
Yeah.
you do?
I do that too. And having grown up with a mom who owned a beauty store, we had lotions and potions and soaps and fragrances and all these amazing things. And so
Right.
as I was growing up, I always enjoyed caring for myself. And that's something that I have never stopped. And, now because I'm a lifestyle expert and I get to try all sorts of things all the time, I'm just drowning in amazing products. And so I'm always trying new masks and lotions and oils. And so for me, it's like, it's such a treat. And so every day, even if, I'm not leaving the house, and part of that ritual for me is caring for myself. I want my skin to feel amazing. I want my skin to look amazing. And that for me is like how I care for myself every day. So that's one. And then I would say too, is fitness. I, I realized in my early 20s and late teens as I was in college and not exercising, like how sort of miserable I was. And I didn't know what it was that was wrong with me at the time. And, I learned that I need to use my body, whether it's just walking around New York City or, doing Pilates at home. My whole adult life has been that fitness has been a part of it. So I that changes too. Like, for a while I was going to the gym and taking classes and that's what worked for me. Then I started working out from home and that was better for me. And I was doing yoga and Pilates and then I got bored of that. And then I started dumbbells and HIIT workouts. And then I do a mix of things now. And, so I think that's also like, as you create these little rituals, just be prepared that they're going to change over time and just sort of go with that. And so now we have, during the pandemic, we have a small house. We took one of this little room that was kind of not very useful and we made it into a workout room. And so now every day, my husband and my daughter and I, we have a place to go where there's a TV and we can watch YouTube videos and we have weights and kettlebells and all the things right there. And so like that's the other part is like no excuses, like you just
Mhm.
go and that's like a gift that I give to myself just about every day is to exercise my body in some way, whether I'm walking and talking with a friend or doing any number of YouTube videos and workouts. But I give myself a lot of flexibility because like some days I feel like this and some days I feel like that. And so I just kind of go with it. And that's how I stay committed to that. And I
Mhm.
also know, like for myself, the mental health aspect of fitness is huge. This is the way I start my day to get my brain going and, my
Mm.
emotions in a really settled space. And so that's a gift. So I would say like the body care, the skin care, and then the exercise, and then I would say the other thing that I give myself is just connecting with people because I work from home. Sometimes I
Mhm.
can get a little bit isolated. So I just make sure that I'm reaching out to people, during the pandemic, especially going on these long walks and talking with friends for an hour. That kept me connected more than anything. And it, really saved me. I feel like saved my mental health through that hard time. And so that's like something else that's really important, especially when you live at home, work from home, it's like all home all the time. It's
Yeah.
really important to stay connected with your people and find new people, and that's the
Mhm.
other part, which is becoming harder as we're working from home. How do we do that? How do we connect? How do we reach out?
Love those. Okay, so I was going to ask you about self-care rituals, but you answered before I did. So thank you very much. I think self-care rituals are so important. They are empowering and we just have to know what our bodies need so that we can give it to it so that it can thrive and so we can enjoy longevity and vitality. And
Mhm.
so thank you for sharing those. What I do want to ask you next is, are there any good parts of menopause? I know we hear a lot of the bad things, we hear about a lot of the false narratives.
Mm.
What's the best part of menopause for you, if there is any?
No period. I guess
I
that's
mean,
like,
it couldn't get better than that, right?
yeah, I don't
Yeah, for me
know.
at least. And for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of it.
I like
My
that.
daughter's 17, so, she started her period basically around the same time that I lost mine, and I was like, so glad to see that
Oh,
go,
oh, yes.
So glad I saved all those supplies for her, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what else. I mean, I think with age, I don't know if it's menopause necessarily, but with age, and we addressed this a bit earlier, is that kind of like comfort with oneself, the understanding of your own abilities and your own knowledge, and how
Mhm,
much easier life can be because of all of that. You have 50 plus years on this planet. Things should
mhm,
be easier because you know so many things and you've made
mhm,
so many mistakes already and you've learned from others around you. So for me, it's like that's powerful. And whether
yeah.
that's, if you could connect that to menopause or it's just aging, I'm all for that.
Love that. Love that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about career.
Mhm.
So we know during this stage, as we get older, as we go through the menopausal phase, hormones change, they decline, and hormones are super powers. They dictate so much of who we are and how we feel. And estrogen especially is huge in terms of how we feel, how our bodies operate, our bone health, every aspect of who we are is kind of governed by this super hormone.
Mm.
And so I feel like, again, it could be aging, and I'm glad you pointed this out earlier, that it could be aging or it could be menopause, right? Because of the loss of estrogen and progesterone, et cetera.
Yeah.
A lot of women become very afraid. They become very scared to explore life, to be adventurous. And they sort of tap into that narrative of fade into the background, know
Mm.
your place. What do you say to women who want to step into their powers, step into their wisdom? Because I'm hearing you
Mm.
talk a lot about the wisdom that you've attained in the prior years. What can women do to really step in and embrace this stage of their lives with their careers, with their passion and their purpose? How can they do that?
I really think that it's a mindset shift that needs to happen. If you are feeling like you belong in the background, I will say that you're wrong. You know, there is a way to step forward. I remember when I was working for Retail Me Not, and the median age of at the company was, I think, 32, and I was
Wow.
48 at the time.
Wow.
So we're at company wide meetings, and I'm like having a hot flash, and I'm one of the faces of the company, and I have gray hair, and everyone else is young, and I don't know, like I kind of just took that as, they wouldn't have put me forward if they didn't think that I was the right person, right? So like I just kind of
Right.
took that and enjoyed that. And I think that if everyone can find those things about them that give them power, and even it's just all those decades behind you, all the things I just think there's a lot that we can accomplish that we may not be giving ourselves enough license for. And it makes me so sad when I see women who are really smart and curious, and they're just not utilizing those powers. and
Yeah.
and I think it's a process to kind of switch your mindset, but once you get to that place, I'm constantly meeting with younger people. The brands that I work with, and everyone on the Zoom is like 25, and there's me with my reading glasses because I can't see the small print on the PowerPoint, and but I just laugh about it. And because of
Right.
what I do is so public, that almost gives me more power. I'm like, you're choosing me to represent you. And so there's something to that. And I feel like if we can all find that special little secret sauce that we have and just like ride it as long as we can, then maybe that's where you gain your power, and then you keep going, and it becomes a snowball, is my hope.
Yeah. Love, 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 love that. What advice would you give to women who are struggling to make career choices, changes, and pivots during this phase?
Don't discount what you offer.
Got it.
We've touched on this a few times already. We have decades of experience behind us. There is value there. Okay. The other thing that I would say, though, is that it's really important in most fields to remain current while also leaning on your prior experience. And what I mean by that is like, I see some women my age in particular who are like, social media, I don't have time for that. Or like, I don't care about that. Or, AI, I'm not touching that. So if you don't touch those things, if you don't develop some familiarity with what's new, you become a dinosaur. And
Mm.
so I believe there's a way to harness all that experience that you've built in your life and touch the new things. I'm not saying you have to become a social media rock star or an expert in AI or whatever else is coming down the pike, but you have to understand what's happening right now, because if you don't understand what's happening right now, you're not relevant anymore. And so that's really, really important for women who want to keep going and use all these powers that they have. You have to also be gaining new powers at the same time.
Right.
It's a tall order, but and you can always lean on your younger colleagues to help you. It's okay to say like, "Oh, threads, I don't what is this? Can you explain it to me?" At least know what it is. At least try it and see. Maybe it falls apart and doesn't become anything, or but maybe it does and then you have no idea what it is and then you're just lost. So
Yeah.
that would be my advice, is like use that knowledge but also be open to gaining new knowledge as things are introduced and are changing.
Got it. Like where would you say is the best place to get started for someone who's like, they want to share their message with others, but they don't know where to start? Which platform, if you have any, you would suggest that somebody jump on and get started, and how?
I mean, I do think, I mean, Instagram is my favorite, just because it's so visual. I do find it very frustrating though.
Right.
Like some
Right.
days I'm a rock star on Instagram and some days I just don't know what's happening. So if you can kind of not depend too much on the engagement factor of it and just putting yourself out there in an authentic way, I think Instagram is a great platform. If you're more if you're more leaning towards just professional connections and developing your career, I also really like LinkedIn. So for me, it could be like one or the other or both, but those to me are the two most relevant platforms right now
Yeah.
and the most
Yeah.
important kind of cornerstone platforms to use.
Got it. Love that advice because the women that I have connected with who are afraid of social media, they are, again, uncomfortable with their bodies. They're uncomfortable with how they look in the camera. And so they are so afraid to go anywhere where there are visual aspects. How can they combat that?
Well, I think LinkedIn is a better, maybe more comfortable place to start because Instagram is so visual. Um,
Mhm.
but I think that it's all part of the journey of trying to get back to a place where you like her in the mirror.
Yeah.
That's part
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
And then the other part is like just always remember that no one is judging you more harshly than you're judging yourself. And if we can always remember that, we see these changes in our faces and our bodies, and we're like, oh, I'm falling apart. Meanwhile, like everyone around us is falling apart, and nobody's thinking these things that we think they're thinking. And if they're
Exactly.
thinking it, who cares? Like,
Right.
that's kind of the other part. Like, if you don't like what I'm wearing or doing or saying, like, whatever for you.
There you go. Love that. Love that. Okay. So, what tips can you offer women who want to prioritize recreation and joy on a budget? So, we're talking about money now, and we're tapping into your money saving expertise. Recreation is important. We deserve recreation. We are worthy of recreation, and it should be a part of our rituals, no
Mm.
matter our age. But yet, I see women at my age who want to do certain things, but they are not doing certain things because, again, back to they're not comfortable with how they look, they're not comfortable with how their clothes are fitting, but they want to do things. And then there are women who want to do things, they're ready, but money is an issue. What would you say to support those women?
I mean, I think, sort of the first part of it is like, prioritizing finding a way to get comfortable is number one. And then from a financial standpoint, uh, recreation, entertainment is so expensive. My husband and I went to the movies the other day and our tickets were
Mm,
$50 for
yeah.
two tickets for an IMAX movie. And I
Crazy.
was like, how do people who are struggling financially do this? I know the answer. It's really about creating a budget for yourself that includes finding that joy. So, yes, you have your financial responsibilities, your immovable expenses like your rent and your food and those things. But if you also have money set aside for maybe it's one movie a month, maybe it's a movie in a
Mhm.
restaurant, create a budget that includes those things rather than waiting to be able to afford them. Find clever ways to save money. Like I love roundup apps, like Acorns is one that I use. And you just attach it to your debit and credit card. And every time you use it, it takes the spare change from each purchase and it puts it into an account and invests that money for you. That's actually like a very pain-free way to save money. And that maybe that's your fun money, right? So every month you look at your account and you're like, oh, I have $25 to spend. What am I going to treat myself to this month? And be realistic with what you can spend, first of all. And is if you're moving into another area in your career and you're earning more, save more there for yourself. And then sort of the an important part of this too is try not to keep up with the Joneses. And this is a very interesting kind of topic, especially with women of our age, that we're all in different places in our careers and our sort of our financial um, situation, right? And so some people are here and some people are here and some people are in the middle and everybody's earning all over the place. So you have to be really realistic about what you can afford versus what your friends can afford. You should not be jetting off to the Amalfi Coast if you don't have that money to spend. Maybe you save incrementally for a year and then you go. But just be really careful about that. And I would also say for the friends who are doing really well financially, think about maybe treating a friend to something, A, or B, and B, meeting your friends who are struggling financially where they are. So find free things that you can do with them if they can't afford the five-star restaurant. Like make compromises so you can meet each other where you are and you're not causing stress to your friend who is struggling financially at that moment. So you can enjoy your time together.
I love that meeting your friend where they are. That is so powerful. What would you say? What are some apps that people can turn to? You mentioned Acorn, is
Mhm.
it?
Acorns
How
is
does that
great
work?
for
And how?
It's so cool. This is one of my favorite ways to save money. So you set up an account. It's like I
Hmm.
think $1 or 2 a month, and
Hmm.
it basically every time you use your debit card and or credit card, it just takes the
Right.
spare change. Like say if you spend $8.50, it'll take 50 cents and move it
Hmm.
into this account, and then it invests that money for you. You can also do automatic withdrawals. So
Got it.
if you end up having a little more wiggle room in your budget and you can save $10 a month, you can add it on to that. And it's very easy to use. So that's one. And then I would also say choose one kind of smart shopping app like PayPal Honey, I really like, Coupon Cabin, I really like. What these apps do is as you're shopping online, they offer you or they alert you to available savings as you're shopping. So it's like, hey, you can get cash back here, or hey, there's a coupon that you can click on. They'll run coupons for you at checkout and then you'll accrue money in that platform that then you could use as your fund money too. So those are like
Mm.
two very easy ways to use technology to save money in a way that's not so hard to do. I think sometimes people are like, I don't have time to look at these circulars and I don't have time to look for sales. And if you're of that mindset, which I tend to be, I don't want to work hard to save. And
Right.
so for me, it's like, how can I use technology to help me? Is always what I'm looking for. So those are two very easy ways.
Yeah, wonderful ways too, because one of the things that finances cause for many women is anxiety, high levels of anxiety. And as we know, the anxiety is even heightened during menopause because of those hormones. So learning how to manage your finances and finding ways to incorporate fun, but with apps like that can help manage your life, I think is so perfect. And I've yet to do it, but of course I'm going to document each and every one of those apps that you mentioned and save them in and save them in the write up. I want to move on to a question that I ask everyone, a variation of a question that I ask everyone. And I know one of your former positions was a journalist. And so, if you were a health reporter or
Mhm.
producer and had to produce a piece on menopause, what would that be and why?
So for me, I would produce a piece that included real women who are going through this or who have been through it, and having a very honest conversation about what to expect and then what to do when those things happen. And so, if you were only, a typical TV piece is like 3.5 to 5 minutes long, right? Hopefully you have more time than that. But kind of talk about those main touch points, like, the weight gain in the body changing, the hair turning gray, the lack of sleep, the anxiety, those main things. I'm probably forgetting something. The hot flashes. If you kind of hit each of those points and had real women talking about how they've encountered it and what they've done to remedy it, and then maybe having a couple of doctors who are well versed in the topic, talking about what technology or what medications or what techniques that you can use just to help ease that road for people going into
Mm.
it and helping women understand what to expect. I mean, I think that we're in this phase of life at a very magical time to be in this phase of life because it's becoming something that people talk about rather than
Mhm.
something to be ashamed of or embarrassed about or to experience alone. So I love that the conversation is coming out like in podcasts like yours, where people are just having this discourse on it, so as a listener that you're not alone. I mean, that's the huge part of it. Is like when I started going through and I went through so early, I didn't really have anybody to talk to. The women who I knew who were older than me had had hysterectomies and they had gone through menopause in a very different way. I didn't know anybody who had just kind of gone through it, just like you do, right? And so I love that this conversation is being had now. And so it's a great time to go through menopause if there ever is one, just because the
Mhm.
conversation is there.
Yeah, I think that's it right there. It is letting people know that you're not alone.
Hmm.
There are others, millions of others going through this transition. Maybe not exactly like you are, but they are going through it. Yeah, thank you for that. I love that. So, what is down the pike for you in terms of career, your multidimensional abilities?
I don't know because right
That's
now I'm in
okay.
a great spot with my career, but I also know because I'm a very sort of public facing person and I'm a woman of certain age, like maybe people won't want to see me on TV after a certain point, and too bad for them is kind of what I say.
Exactly.
Um, you know, I don't know, and that's kind of out of my control. So I'll keep going and keep partnering with brands, and as long as they want me to represent them and my work product is good, like I'm turning 55 this year, so I'll just keep cruising along. I would like to retire at 65 if I could. I do think that one thing that I'm lacking right now is volunteering. I'm not volunteering nearly as much as I'd like to,
Mm,
and there are certain areas that I'm interested in. First, mentoring women of our age or women coming up through menopause.
yeah.
I'm very interested in that. I'm
Mhm.
also very interested in maybe volunteering at a hospice and reading to the elderly or people who are sick and can't read. Like I want to carve out time for that. I'd like to sit on some boards because I've started my own business a couple times now and have a lot to offer. And so that's kind of my like my goal as myself as elder statesman to
Mm,
start doing that at some point. But I don't have a set timeline just because I'm enjoying myself now. And the other big part of my life that's going to change soon, and we talked about this the other day, is my daughter's getting ready to go off to college in a year. And so I
yeah.
have one child, and so I'm about to be an empty nester. So I'm like middle aged, gray haired, empty nester. What does that mean? And
Listen.
for me, so I'm kind of fascinated by what that's going to be. And so I think my life will change probably more than I'm anticipating when she leaves. And it's like, what does my life look like when she's gone? And so
Yeah.
that'll be a transition that I don't really know what to do with at the moment, but I'm sure it'll reveal itself at the time.
It
So,
will.
so no set plans, but ideas.
Got it. I love that because you have all of these ideas and you sound so enthusiastic and so passionate about them. But the thing is that you are just allowing life to unfold in front of you. And these ideas you've given life, which at some point I know you will touch, and that's the whole idea, touching these ideas, not thinking, oh, I'm too old for this. Oh, I don't have to do this. Like you were like, they're just going to have to get you seeing my face. We need your face. We need your inspiration. You are inspirational to me and I know you'll be inspirational to the other people who hear this podcast. So thank you. And as for empty nesting, yes, I'm there right now. And it was, when I tell you, it was something. If you need any help, you can always call me
I'll
up,
be
send me
calling
an
you.
email, send me a text.
Oh.
Because it's a whole other set of issues navigating that plus menopause plus I mean it's like the compound effect, but you come out on the other side so beautifully. I mean the lessons are priceless. Thank you so much for sharing with us your expertise, your financial tips, your menopausal tips, your self-care tips. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. But before you go, I need to know where we can find you, how we can stay connected with you.
Yes, so you can follow me at True Trae. It's TrueTrae. I'm that on Instagram, which is my main account, and then True Trae on Facebook, on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, Threads, and TrueTrae.com.
Wonderful. I mean, check her out, everyone, because she has great ideas and tips. Like I said, I've been stalking her Instagram and I've been stalking her website and listening to all the past snippets and advice that she's given on the tons and tons of media outlet. Really do check it out. And I will post the links to all of the apps that she mentioned for you so that you can access them. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I appreciate you so much. Take care. Let's perimenopause and prosper. Trey, thank you.
Thank you.